Have you ever wondered what happens when a web of perfect lies is torn apart by a single, undeniable truth? This isn't a story about a simple affair. This is the story of Amelia Hayes, 7 months pregnant and living a fairy tale life with her charismatic millionaire husband, Ethan Sterling. It's a story of ultimate betrayal, not just of vows, but of a future built on a foundation of deceit. But more than that, it's the story of what happens when the one you betrayed is the beloved daughter of Alistair Hayes, a man who doesn't just own empires, he commands them. Stay with me as we unravel how a single act of infidelity triggered a corporate war, a social annihilation, and a devastating revenge that proves that some lines should never, ever be crossed. The penthouse on Central Park West was less a home and more a statement. Its floor-to-ceiling windows drank in the New York City skyline, reflecting a life of curated perfection. For Amelia Hayes Sterling, this view was the backdrop to her dream. At 28, she was intelligent, graceful, and 7 months pregnant with her first child. Her husband, Ethan Sterling, was the architect of this dream. A self-made millionaire at 35, he had built his venture capital firm, Sterling Ventures, into a notable player in the tech investment world. He was handsome, ambitious, and to the outside world, utterly devoted to his beautiful wife. Their life was a meticulously orchestrated ballet of high society galas, weekends in the Hamptons, and spontaneous trips to Paris. Ethan showered Amelia with gifts, a vintage Cartier watch 1 week, a first edition Virginia Woolf novel the next. He would place a hand on her growing belly, his eyes shining with what she believed was pure, unadulterated joy. Our little legacy. He'd whisper, his voice a warm hum against her ear. Everything I do, Amelia, is for you and for this baby. But even in the most perfect cages, the bars can start to feel cold. The first hint of a crack in their flawless facade was almost laughably mundane. It was a credit card statement. Amelia, a former financial analyst herself, still managed their personal accounts. Tucked between a charge for a charity auction at the Met and a lavish dinner at Père Say was a name she didn't recognize, the Mercer Hotel Soho, 785 to 40,000. Ethan had been on a business trip to Chicago that weekend. He'd called her every night, describing the blustery wind off Lake Michigan and the tediousness of his investor meetings. He had no reason to be at a boutique hotel in downtown Manhattan. She brought it up that evening, her tone light, casual as she swirled a glass of sparkling water. "Honey, did you have a meeting at the Mercer last month? There's a charge here from the 10th. Ethan didn't even look up from his iPad, where he was scrolling through market reports. "Must be a mistake," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "The bank probably miscoded something. I'll have my assistant Jessica sort it out. Don't worry your pretty head about it." Don't worry your pretty head about it. The phrase, once a term of endearment, suddenly felt patronizing, dismissive. A cold knot formed in the pit of her stomach, right above where her daughter was kicking. She let it go, telling herself it was just pregnancy hormones, making her paranoid. A week later, another thread appeared. Ethan came home late from a networking dinner, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers. It was a subtle floral scent, L'Interdit by Givenchy. She knew it because her younger cousin wore it. It was a scent for a woman in her early 20s, not the wives of the aging banking executives Ethan claimed to be dining with. "You smell nice," she said, trying to keep her voice even as she helped him off with his coat. "Thanks," he said, kissing her forehead. "Probably just picked it up from someone in the restaurant. The place was packed." He was already walking away, loosening his tie, his mind on a hot shower and a glass of scotch. The excuses were plausible, but they were beginning to stack up like unread newspapers. There were the late-night texts he'd angle his phone away to read the sudden emergency work calls that took him out onto the terrace in the middle of dinner. His voice a low, urgent murmur she couldn't quite decipher. Each instance was a tiny pinprick in the balloon of her happiness. Alone, they were nothing. Together, they were starting to let the air out of her life. The final undeniable thread came during a routine visit to her obstetrician on the Upper East Side. As she was leaving, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, she saw him. Ethan. He was half a block away, standing on the corner of Madison Avenue, laughing. He wasn't alone. He was with a young woman, a striking brunette with long legs and a chic all-black outfit. Amelia watched, frozen, as Ethan tucked a stray strand of hair behind the woman's ear, his touch lingering and intimate. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a deep, passionate kiss right there on the sun-drenched sidewalk. The world around Amelia went silent. The honking taxis, the chatter of pedestrians, the very rhythm of the city faded into a dull roar in her ears. She saw the woman laugh, a bright, carefree sound, and link her arm through Ethan's as they walked into a chic little bistro. Amelia stood there for a full 5 minutes, her hand clenched so tightly on her purse strap that her knuckles turned white. The man who whispered promises into her hair at night, the man who called their unborn child his legacy, had just kissed another woman with a familiarity that spoke of countless stolen moments. The taxi ride back to the penthouse was a blur. The view of the city that had once filled her with joy now seemed to mock her, a glittering monument to a beautiful hollow lie. She walked into their home, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of her heart. She looked at the photos on the mantelpiece, their wedding in Tuscany, their charity work, their perfect smiles. It was all a sham. The gilded cage wasn't a home. It was a stage, and she had been the unwitting star of a one-woman show. The question was no longer if her husband was cheating. The question was, what was she going to do about it? And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was not a problem she could solve alone. She needed her father. Amelia didn't confront Ethan that night. The sight of him kissing another woman had shattered her reality. But a lifetime spent as Alistair Hayes's daughter had taught her one invaluable lesson. Never engage in a battle until you control the terrain. Emotion was a liability. Information was power. She spent the next 48 hours in a state of chillingly calm resolve. She went through the motions discussing nursery colors, smiling at Ethan's anecdotes about work, even allowing him to kiss her goodnight. But inside, she was a strategist, mapping out a campaign. The first step was to identify the enemy. She recalled the woman's face, young, sharp, with an air of ambitious confidence. She'd seen her before. A quick mental search, cross-referencing with company newsletters and event photos, brought up a name, Chloe Vance, a junior associate at Sterling Ventures, a rising star, Ethan had once called her. He'd praised her hunger and brilliant market instincts. Amelia now understood he wasn't just talking about her professional acumen. Chloe was 25, impossibly chic, and had been working closely with Ethan on a new fintech acquisition for the past 6 months. Knowing the who wasn't enough. Amelia needed the what, where, and how often. Crying to Ethan would only result in a cascade of lies and gaslighting. He would call her hormonal paranoid crazy. He would twist reality until she doubted her own eyes. No, she needed irrefutable proof. She didn't turn to a friend. This was too private, too humiliating. She made a single discreet phone call to a number her father had given her years ago for emergencies. The man who answered was Frank Miller, a private investigator whose gruff demeanor belied a meticulous, almost artistic approach to his work. He was ex-NYPD, with a network of contacts that ran through every doorman, valet, and maitre d' in the city. "Amelia," Frank's gravelly voice came through the phone. "Your father said you might call one day. Hoped you never would. What's the problem?" Amelia, sitting in her pristine white marble bathroom, laid out the facts with the detached precision of a CEO outlining a hostile takeover. She gave him Ethan's name, Chloe Vance's name, the date of the Mercer Hotel charge, and the location of the bistro on Madison Avenue. "I don't want suspicions, Frank," she said, her voice devoid of tears. "I want a timeline. I want receipts. I want photographs. I want everything." "You'll get it," he promised. "Give me a week." The week was the longest of Amelia's life. She felt like an actress playing a part she no longer believed in. Every loving word from Ethan was a shard of glass in her ear. Every touch felt like a violation. She focused on her baby, talking to her, reading to her, creating a tiny protected bubble in the midst of the storm she knew was coming. Exactly 1 week later, a plain manila envelope was delivered by courier. Inside was a USB drive and a short typed note from Frank. "Amelia, I'm sorry. The evidence is comprehensive." With trembling hands, she plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen filled with folders, each labeled with a date. She clicked on the first one. It contained photos of Ethan and Chloe at a candlelit dinner at a secluded restaurant in the West Village, their heads close together, his hand covering hers on the table. Another folder showed them entering the Mercer Hotel, their arms around each other. There were receipts for gifts, a diamond necklace from Tiffany's, a designer handbag from a boutique on Bleecker Street. Things Ethan had never bought for her. The timeline stretched back 8 months. It had started just after she announced her pregnancy. The betrayal was staggering in its scope and audacity. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had been living a complete double life. The final file was a short audio recording captured by a discreet microphone Frank had paid a waiter to place on their table. Chloe's voice was light, girlish. "But what about Amelia? The baby is due soon, isn't it?" Ethan's reply was the blow that finally shattered Amelia's composure. He laughed. It was a low, dismissive sound. "Amelia is comfortable. She has everything she wants. The pregnancy is a complication, sure, but it solidifies my position with her father. Alistair would never rock the boat for his grandchild. After the baby is born and the new fund is closed, I'll handle it. I'll make it easy for her. She'll be well taken care of." Handle it. A complication. Make it easy for her. He wasn't talking about his wife and child. He was talking about a business merger. A problem to be managed. The love, the promises, the shared dreams. It was all a calculated performance to secure his standing with her father. She wasn't his partner. She was his collateral. That evening when Ethan came home, Amelia was waiting for him in the living room. The laptop was open on the coffee table, a single photo of him and Chloe kissing displayed on the screen. He stopped dead in the doorway, his briefcase slipping from his hand and hitting the polished floor with a dull thud. The color drained from his face. "Amelia, what is this? This is your life, Ethan," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "The one you've been living behind my back for the last 8 months." For a moment, he was speechless. Then the instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He launched into the script she had predicted. "This is not what it looks like. She's just a colleague. You're pregnant, your hormones are all over the place. You're misinterpreting things. Who gave you this? You've been spying on me. He was trying to make her the villain to turn her pain into paranoia, but Amelia was no longer the trusting, adoring wife. She was Alistair Hayes's daughter. "Don't," she said, her voice cutting through his excuses like a razor. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me. I have seen everything, Ethan. The hotel receipts, the gifts. I have even heard you." She played the audio clip. His own voice filled the silent room, callous and calculating, as he described his wife as a complication. The sound of his own words finally broke him. The facade of the devoted husband crumbled, revealing the craven opportunist beneath. His expression shifted from feigned outrage to pure animal panic. "Amelia, please," he stammered, taking a step towards her. "It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It means nothing. You and the baby. You're my life. We can fix this. Please, don't tell your father." And there it was, the real fear. It wasn't the fear of losing her. It was the fear of losing his access to her father's world, her father's power, her father's money. Amelia stood up, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, a shield protecting her child from the poison in the room. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had promised her life to, and felt nothing but a vast, empty coldness. "It's too late for that, Ethan," she said, her voice echoing with a finality that terrified him. "You didn't just break my heart. You threatened my child. You called my daughter a complication. You have no idea what you've just done." She walked past him out of the living room and into their bedroom, locking the door behind her. She picked up her phone. Her hands were steady now. She scrolled to a single contact saved simply as Dad and pressed the call button. The line connected after a single ring. Alistair Hayes. His voice was deep, commanding, even over the phone. "Dad," Amelia said, and for the first time a single tear traced a path down her cheek. "I need you to come home." Alistair Hayes did not get to be worth an estimated $60 billion by being a patient man. The founder and CEO of Hayes Global Conglomerate, a sprawling empire with interests in everything from shipping logistics and rare earth minerals to biotechnology and private equity, operated on a single principle: decisive action. When he received the call from his only child, his fiercely beloved Amelia, and heard the tremor of controlled pain in her voice, his world narrowed to a single point of focus. He was in Tokyo, closing a multi-billion-dollar deal on a new robotics firm. Within minutes of hanging up with Amelia, he had walked out of the final negotiation, leaving his stunned Japanese counterparts and his own board members in the lurch. He simply said, "Family emergency. My jet leaves in 30 minutes. Close the deal on my terms or we walk." He knew they would fold. They always did. 16 hours later, Alistair Hayes strode into the Central Park West penthouse. He was 62, but looked a decade younger, with a full head of silver hair, a custom-tailored suit that fit him like a second skin, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a force of nature. He radiated an aura of absolute power that made rooms feel smaller and other men feel inadequate. He found Amelia in the nursery, calmly folding baby clothes. She looked pale, but resolute. He enveloped her in a hug, his usual firm embrace softened with a tenderness reserved only for her. He didn't press for details immediately. He simply held her, letting her draw strength from his presence. "He's in the guest room," she said quietly, pulling away. "He tried to talk to me all night, pleading, apologizing. I locked the door." "Good," Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. Now tell me everything." Sitting on a small rocking chair, surrounded by the soft yellows and creams of the unfinished nursery, Amelia laid out the entire sordid story. She told him about the credit card charge, the perfume, the kiss on Madison Avenue. She handed him the USB drive from Frank Miller. Alistair plugged it into a sleek, impossibly thin tablet he produced from his briefcase and reviewed the evidence in silence. His face was a granite mask, but Amelia could see a muscle twitching in his jaw, the only sign of the tectonic rage building beneath the surface. He listened to the audio recording, his eyes narrowing as he heard Ethan Sterling, the man he had welcomed into his family, the man to whom he had entrusted his daughter's happiness, describe his pregnant wife and unborn grandchild as a complication and a stepping stone. When the recording finished, he placed the tablet down with quiet precision. The silence in the room was heavy, dangerous. "Where is he?" Alistair asked, his voice lethally calm. Ethan was a ghost in his own home. He hadn't slept, his expensive suit was rumpled, and his face was ashen with fear. When he saw Alistair Hayes enter the living room, he visibly flinched like a dog expecting a blow. "Alistair, thank God you're here." Ethan began, his voice slick with manufactured relief. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Amelia she's not herself. The pregnancy—" Alistair raised a single hand, and Ethan's words died in his throat. "Do not," Alistair said, each word a chip of ice, "insult my intelligence or my daughter's. I have seen the photographs. I have read the reports. I have heard your voice discussing my family as if they were line items in a quarterly report. You did not have a misunderstanding, Mr. Sterling. You made a calculation, and you have miscalculated." He began to pace slowly, his footsteps silent on the expensive rug. "I vetted you, you know, thoroughly. Your financials were solid, your ambition was impressive, you were clever. I thought your cleverness was an asset. I mistook it for character. I gave you my daughter, my legacy, and you treated her like a stock option." Panic seized Ethan. "Alistair, I love her. I do. This other thing, it was nothing. It's over. I'll do anything to make it right. Counseling, anything." Alistair stopped pacing and turned to face him fully. The look in his eyes was not anger. It was something far worse. It was the detached, analytical gaze of a man about to liquidate a failed asset. "Let me explain something to you about my world, Ethan. In my world, we don't fix things that are fundamentally broken. We tear them down and build something new in their place. You are fundamentally broken." He walked over to the vast window overlooking Central Park. "Look at this," he said, gesturing to the city below. "You saw all of this, and you thought it was the prize. You thought marrying my daughter gave you a key to this kingdom. You are mistaken. My daughter is the kingdom. All of this He swept his arm again, "is just the scenery." He turned back, his face set. "You have made two catastrophic errors. First, you betrayed my daughter. Second, you underestimated me. You seem to believe my primary concern would be avoiding a scandal for my grandchild's sake, that I wouldn't rock the boat. That is the logic of a small man. My grandchild will be a Hayes. They will be born into a dynasty of strength, not into a house of whispers and compromise. Their mother's honor is the foundation of that dynasty." Alistair pulled out his phone and made a call. "Eleanor, it's Alistair Hayes. I have a new client for you. My daughter." He paused, listening. "The retainer is unlimited. The objective is scorched earth. I want his assets frozen by morning. I want every clause in the prenuptial agreement enforced with extreme prejudice. And I want him out of this apartment by noon tomorrow." Ethan stared, horrified. Eleanor Vance was not just a lawyer. She was the most feared divorce attorney in New York, a legal piranha known for leaving her opponents with nothing but their shoelaces. "Alistair, you can't," Ethan pleaded, his voice cracking. "My company, my reputation." Alistair snapped his phone shut and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at Ethan with an expression of profound disappointment, as if observing a failed experiment. "Your company," he said with a dry, mirthless chuckle. "Sterling Ventures was built on seed money from my associates and propped up by the credibility of my family name. Your reputation was rented, not earned, and the lease has just expired." He walked to the door, then paused for one final devastating pronouncement. "You built your little sand castle in my kingdom, Ethan," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Now you get to watch me command the tide." He left the room, leaving Ethan Sterling standing alone in the opulent penthouse that was no longer his, the terrifying reality of his situation finally crashing down upon him. He had not just lost his wife. He had declared war on an emperor. Alistair Hayes did not wage war with cannons and trumpets. His methods were far more insidious and devastating. He waged war in the silent, sterile arenas of boardrooms, stock markets, and back-channel conversations. For Ethan Sterling, the first wave of the attack was not a dramatic confrontation, but a creeping, chilling sense that the world he knew was methodically turning against him. The first blow landed at 9:01 a.m. the next day. An email from the COO of North Atlantic Bank, his firm's primary lender, landed in his inbox. The subject line was "Urgent Review of Credit Lines." The email stated that due to newly identified market volatilities and a reassessment of portfolio risk, the bank was immediately calling in a $50 million bridge loan and freezing Sterling Ventures' operating credit. It was corporate jargon for a death sentence. That loan wasn't just crucial, it was the lifeblood of 3 of his major ongoing deals. Alistair Hayes held a significant, though not controlling, stake in North Atlantic Bank's parent company. It was a connection Ethan had once bragged about. Now it was a noose. He spent the morning in a frantic series of calls trying to secure alternate financing. Every door once wide open was now slammed shut in his face. Bankers who had eagerly taken his calls for years were suddenly in meetings or traveling. The invisible hand of Alistair Hayes was squeezing the life out of his company. The second blow was social. That evening was the annual Children's Health Foundation Gala, the glittering centerpiece of the fall social season. Amelia and Ethan were supposed to be co-chairs. When Ethan arrived, hoping to project an image of stability, he found his name and face had been scrubbed from the event. The programs had been reprinted. The seating chart where he was meant to be at the head table now had a prominent philanthropist in his place. When he approached a group of investors he'd known for years, they gave him curt nods and turned away, their conversations dropping to whispers. He was a ghost at the feast, a pariah in a tuxedo. The message was clear. You are no longer one of us. While Ethan was being publicly ostracized, Amelia was being shielded. Alistair had moved her into a sprawling suite at the Carlyle, a hotel he practically owned, and had her surrounded by a quiet but formidable team. A private nurse to monitor her pregnancy, a chef to handle her meals, and a personal security detail to ensure her privacy. He visited her every day, not to talk about the war he was waging, but to talk about the future. They discussed names for the baby plans for the foundation he was establishing in her name, and the new life she would build. "This is not about revenge, Amelia," he told her one afternoon as they looked out over the city. "Revenge is an emotional, messy act. This is a correction, a realignment of the universe to its proper order. He was a bug on the windshield of our life, and I am simply cleaning the glass." But Amelia knew it was more than that. She saw the cold fire in her father's eyes. This was about retribution. It was about ensuring that the man who hurt his daughter would serve as a permanent public example of what happened when you crossed the Hayes family. Meanwhile, Alistair's silent war escalated. He began a systematic poaching of Sterling Ventures' key talent. The firm's top analyst, a woman responsible for their most successful IPO, received an unsolicited offer from a rival firm for triple her salary and a corner office overlooking the bay in San Francisco. The offer was quietly backed by a holding company owned by Hayes Global. Within a week, Ethan's 3 most vital employees had resigned, taking their expertise and their client lists with them. His company was being hollowed out from the inside. The third and perhaps most brutal front in this war was legal. Eleanor Vance Amelia's new lawyer moved with terrifying speed. She had successfully argued for an immediate and total freeze on all of Ethan's personal and business assets, pending the divorce settlement. Ethan found his personal bank accounts locked. His credit cards declined. He couldn't even pay for his own lawyer. The prenup he had signed, which he thought was a mere formality, was an ironclad document drafted by Alistair's personal legal team. It had a stringent infidelity clause that not only voided any claim he might have to Amelia's assets, but it also clawed back any significant financial gifts received during the marriage. That included the seed money for his company, which Alistair had funneled to him through a family gift structure. Legally, Eleanor Vance was arguing Sterling Ventures itself was a marital gift, and Ethan was now in default. Ethan was trapped. His business was collapsing, his social standing was gone, and he was financially paralyzed. He hadn't yet grasped the full horrifying scope of the attack. He still thought he was suffering a catastrophic run of bad luck, perhaps nudged along by an angry father-in-law. He hadn't yet understood that this wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was a meticulously executed campaign of annihilation, orchestrated by a master, and it was only just beginning. The silent war was about to get very, very loud. The silent war became a public execution on a Tuesday morning. The lead story on the front page of the Wall Street Journal's Money and Investing section was an exposé titled "Sterling Ventures, a House of Cards." The article was a masterpiece of character assassination cloaked in the language of financial journalism. It detailed with surgical precision the precarious financial structuring of Ethan's firm. It hinted at over-leveraged positions and questionable due diligence in his recent acquisitions. Most damningly, it quoted several anonymous, high-level sources from within the investment community who expressed grave concerns about Sterling's leadership and erratic personal behavior. The sources were, of course, all lieutenants of Alistair Hayes, feeding carefully curated information to a journalist Alistair had on his personal payroll for just such an occasion. The story didn't mention the affair. It didn't need to. It painted Ethan Sterling not as an adulterer, but as something far worse in their world, a bad investment, a fraud, a failure. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By noon, his remaining investors were in a full-blown panic, demanding their money back. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, announced a preliminary inquiry into his firm's practices, triggered by an anonymous tip. Sterling Ventures wasn't just dying, it was being dissected in a public autopsy. beaten and cornered. Ethan did the one thing he had left to do. He drove to the Hayes Global Conglomerate headquarters, a monolithic tower of black glass and steel in Midtown that seemed to blot out the sun. He bypassed the front desk using his old, now deactivated family access card to get to the executive elevator. He rode it to the top floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found Alistair in his office, a cavernous space with a singular, priceless Jackson Pollock painting on one wall and a commanding view of the entire city on the other. Alistair was on the phone, his back to the door. He didn't turn around. "Ethan, I knew you'd come," Alistair said, still looking out the window. Punctuality in the face of annihilation. It's an admirable, if useless, trait. He finished his call and turned his face calm and unreadable. "You did this..." Ethan choked out his voice raw. "The bank, the gala, my employees, the Wall Street Journal. This was all you." "I did not," Alistair corrected him calmly. "You did this. You lit the match. I simply control the wind." "This isn't a correction. This is destruction," Ethan yelled, his composure finally cracking. "You're ruining me." "For what?" "A mistake. People have affairs every day." Alistair walked slowly toward his massive mahogany desk and sat down, steepling his fingers. "You are still thinking on such a small scale. This isn't about the affair, not anymore. That was merely the catalyst. This is about your fundamental character flaw. You saw my daughter as a means to an end. You saw my family as a ladder. Men like you are a virus, Ethan. You attach yourself to success, and you drain it for your own sustenance. I am not just destroying you. I am performing an exorcism." Desperation clawed at Ethan. "What about Chloe?" "The girl I was with, is she next?" Alistair's expression flickered with something cold. "Ms. Vance has already been dealt with. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the managing partner of the law firm, where her aunt, a rather prominent judge, is a senior partner. The second was to the dean of her alma mater, to which I am a considerable benefactor. I explained that a person of her moral character was a potential liability. Her offer for a coveted position at Goldman Sachs has been rescinded. Her name has been quietly blacklisted at every major financial institution in this city. She will be lucky to get a job balancing the books at a bodega in Queens. She like you made a bad investment." The sheer breathtaking scope of Alistair's power was laid bare. He didn't just move money. He moved the entire board. He could end a career with 2 phone calls. Ethan sank into one of the leather chairs opposite the desk, a broken man. "Please, Alistair, stop. For Amelia's sake, for the baby. Think of the scandal this will cause them." It was the wrong thing to say. Alistair leaned forward, the calm mask dropping to reveal the fury beneath. "You will not use my daughter or my grandchild's name as a shield. The only scandal here is you, and I am erasing you. By the time I am finished, Ethan, your name will be a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. A lesson parents teach their sons about hubris. You will have nothing. Your company will be a bankrupt shell. Your reputation will be radioactive, and your name will be a synonym for failure." He stood up, the audience concluded. "My security team will escort you from the building. Your presence is no longer welcome here or anywhere in my world." As 2 large men in sharp suits entered the office, Ethan looked at the man who had once been his father-in-law. He saw no mercy, no regret. He saw only the icy resolve of an emperor protecting his dynasty. The glass house he had so carefully constructed had not just been shattered, Its shards were being ground into dust, and he was being buried under them. The descent from millionaire to pariah was brutally swift. Within a month, Sterling Ventures was forced into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The gleaming office in the Seagram building was shuttered, its assets liquidated for pennies on the dollar to pay off creditors. The penthouse on Central Park West, which had been in Amelia's name, was sold. Ethan was left with nothing but a few designer suits and a mountain of personal legal bills. He moved into a soulless corporate rental apartment in Jersey City, the glittering Manhattan skyline now a distant, mocking reminder of the life he had lost. His friends, the ones who had clapped him on the back at exclusive clubs and golf courses, no longer answered his calls. He was a social leper, a financial contagion to be avoided at all costs. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on him day and night. Meanwhile, Amelia was moving in the opposite direction. Freed from the suffocating perfection of her old life, she began to flourish. Her father had fast-tracked the launch of the Hayes Foundation for Maternal and Child Health, a philanthropic endeavor they had once discussed in abstract terms. He didn't just give her a title, he gave her real responsibility. She threw herself into the work, her background in finance proving invaluable. She met with doctors, researchers, and community organizers, her passion and intelligence shining through. The pregnancy was progressing well, and she found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She wasn't just Alistair Hayes's sheltered daughter anymore. She was Amelia Hayes, a future mother, and the driving force behind a major charitable foundation. She was building a legacy of her own, one based on substance, not style. She rarely thought of Ethan, and when she did, it was with a strange detached pity for the smallness of his ambition. One evening, desperation drove Ethan to make one last pathetic attempt. He showed up outside the Carlisle, waiting for Amelia to return from a foundation meeting. He looked terrible, thin, unshaven, his expensive coat hanging off his frame. "Amelia," he called out as she stepped out of her car. Her security detail moved to intercept him, but she held up a hand. "It's all right, Tom," she said, her voice calm. She faced her estranged husband under the warm glow of the hotel's awning. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice raspy. "For everything. I was a fool. I lost the most important thing in my life. I know it's too late, but I needed you to hear it." Amelia looked at him, her gaze clear and steady. For a moment she tried to see the man she had fallen in love with, but he was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out shell. His apology didn't ring of remorse. It rang of regret for his own downfall. "I hear you, Ethan," she said softly. "But forgiveness is not something I am prepared to offer. My only concern now is the health and safety of my daughter. Goodbye." She turned and walked into the hotel without a backward glance, leaving him alone on the sidewalk. That rejection was for Ethan the final nail in his coffin. He was truly alone. Beaten broke and stripped of all dignity, Ethan spent his days in his barren apartment, obsessively replaying his downfall. He blamed Alistair, he blamed Chloe, he blamed everyone but himself. In his paranoid state, he started digging. He wasn't looking for financial data, he was looking for dirt. He scoured old articles, forgotten interviews, and obscure online forums about Alistair Hayes's early days. Alistair was a titan now, but titans always leave footprints when they climb the mountain. After weeks of obsessive searching, he found it. A ghost from Alistair's past. It was a story from the early 1990s concerning Hayes's hostile takeover of a rival shipping company. The company's founder, a man named Marcus Thorne, had died by suicide just weeks after losing his life's work to Alistair's ruthless corporate raiding. The media at the time had painted it as a tragic consequence of a brutal business battle. But Ethan found a comment thread on an old financial blog where a user claiming to be Thorne's former junior partner alleged that Alistair had used illegal tactics, insider information blackmail, to force the sale and ruin Thorne. The allegations were never proven. The partner had vanished into obscurity. But the whispers were there. It was a long shot, a flimsy piece of leverage, but it was all he had. In his mind, it was a lifeline. He believed he had found a crack in the Emperor's armor. He compiled his research into a single damning file. He would not go down without a fight. He would use Alistair's past to secure his future. It was a move born not of strategy, but of pure, cornered desperation. He requested one final meeting with Alistair Hayes, sending a cryptic message through a lawyer. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say about Marcus Thorne." For the first time in months, Alistair agreed to see him. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He was about to play his last card, unaware that he was walking into the final masterfully set trap. The meeting was not set in the cold corporate stratosphere of Alistair's primary office. Instead, Ethan was escorted to a small private library on the 30th floor of the Hayes Global Tower. The room was a sanctuary of old-world power, a stark contrast to the modern steel and glass that surrounded it. Walls were paneled with dark, rich mahogany and lined with priceless leather-bound first editions. The air smelled of aged paper cedar and the faint, pleasant aroma of Alistair's cigar from the night before. A fire crackled softly in a marble fireplace, its flames dancing across the faces of stoic marble busts of Roman emperors. It was a room that whispered of dynasties and long-held secrets, a room designed to make visitors feel their own insignificance. Alistair Hayes was standing by the fireplace, a heavy crystal tumbler of amber whiskey swirling in his hand. He looked entirely at ease, a king in his own private study. He turned as Ethan was shown in his face a mask of polite neutrality. Ethan, by contrast, was a frayed nerve ending in a wrinkled suit. He clutched a leather portfolio to his chest like a shield. "Ethan." Alistair's voice was a low, calm rumble that seemed to be absorbed by the books around them. "You requested this audience, citing a matter of historical interest, Marcus Thorne, a name I haven't heard spoken aloud in many years. I must admit, you've piqued my curiosity. Please enlighten me." This was it, the moment Ethan had rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. He felt a surge of desperate adrenaline, mistaking it for confidence. He stepped forward and placed his portfolio on a massive antique coffee table, opening it with a flourish. "I've been doing some research into your past, Alistair," he began, his voice gaining strength. "Specifically, your acquisition of Thorne Maritime in 1993. A brilliant, if notoriously hostile takeover. But the story has always been incomplete." He slid a sheaf of papers across the table, old press clippings, printouts from obscure financial forums. "I found things," Ethan continued. His eyes locked on Alistair. "Whispers of insider trading, allegations of blackmail used against Thorne's board members. And then there's the tragic end to the story. Marcus Thorne, a respected man, a pioneer in his field, utterly ruined. He lost his company, his reputation, his life's work. They found him in his study, dead by his own hand, just 3 weeks after you signed the final papers. A man driven to despair." Ethan leaned in, trying to project an aura of command. "I've made contact with his former junior partner, a man named Paul Ziegler. He's been silent for 30 years, but he's willing to talk now. to the SEC, to the New York Times. He's willing to tell the world how you really built your empire. He sat back, his heart hammering. This was his checkmate. He had found the rotten beam in the foundation of the Hayes Empire. A story like that. The great Alistair Hayes, the benevolent titan of industry, revealed as a corporate predator whose rise was built on the grave of a good man. It would be devastating. Think of the stock price. Think of your legacy. Think of what the world will say. He let the threat hang in the air. I believe we can come to a quiet, private arrangement that would be beneficial for everyone. An arrangement that would allow me to disappear, and for this unfortunate history to remain buried. Throughout Ethan's speech, Alistair remained motionless, his expression unreadable. He simply listened, his gaze steady. When Ethan finished, Alistair took a slow, deliberate sip of his whiskey. He set the glass down on the mantelpiece with a quiet click that echoed in the silent room. Then, to Ethan's utter shock, a slow, cold smile spread across his face. "Is that it?" Alistair asked, his voice laced with a genuine, almost pitying amusement. "That is the hand you've come to play. The ghost of Marcus Thorne." He walked slowly over to an ornate globe standing in the corner of the room. He gave it a gentle spin. "Your mistake, Ethan, is that you are an amateur historian. You read the headlines, but you failed to read the footnotes. You see, I haven't spent the last 30 years hoping this story wouldn't come out. I've spent it preparing for the day it would." He pulled a slim tablet from a drawer and tapped the screen. A section of the bookshelf behind him slid away, silently revealing a large integrated monitor. It showed a live feed of the building's main auditorium. It was filled with journalists, a podium at the front bearing the Hayes Global logo. Ethan stared confused. "What is this?" "This," Alistair said, "is your legacy. When you sent your little message, my communications team began preparing immediately. You see, you haven't uncovered a scandal. You've simply provided me with the perfect narrative opportunity." He turned his full attention back to Ethan, his eyes glinting like chips of ice. "Let me fill in the blanks your research missed. Was I ruthless with Marcus Thorne?" "Absolutely. Business at that level is a blood sport. But Marcus wasn't a noble victim. He was a fraud. Your source, Paul Ziegler, failed to mention that Thorne Maritime was a sinking ship riddled with debt because Marcus was embezzling millions to cover gambling losses in Monaco. I have forensic reports from Deloitte dating back to 1994 that trace every single dollar to offshore accounts. Marcus Thorne killed himself not because I took his company, but because he was a week away from being indicted on federal fraud charges. The blood drained from Ethan's face. "And your star witness, Paul Ziegler." Alistair chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "Paul is a dear friend. He's currently on his 70-foot yacht, the Severance Pay, off the coast of Grand Cayman. The generous pension I pay him is contingent on a lifelong ironclad non-disclosure agreement. He takes my call every Christmas. He will not be speaking to you or the New York Times or anyone else." Alistair gestured to the screen where his head of power was now approaching the podium. "In 5 minutes I will go downstairs and give a press conference. I will announce the full funding for the Hayes Foundation for Maternal and Child Health in honor of my daughter and the impending birth of my grandchild. Then I will tell the story of Marcus Thorne myself. I will frame it as a brutal formative experience from my past that taught me the profound human cost of corporate warfare. And in his memory, I will announce the formation of a new $100 million wing of the foundation, the Thorne Center for Executive Mental Health and Crisis Support. I will turn your clumsy blackmail into a masterclass in corporate responsibility and philanthropic grace. The headlines won't be about a scandal. They'll be about my redemption." He walked until he was standing directly in front of Ethan, looking down at the broken man slumped in the chair. "Your mistake was never just the affair, Ethan. Your fundamental flaw is that you have no imagination. You look at a man like me, and you see money and power. You don't see the decades of strategy, the layers of contingency. You tried to fight a war of secrets with a man who has never had a secret he didn't plant himself. You brought a knife to a nuclear holocaust." His voice dropped, losing all its warmth, becoming a final devastating judgment. "You will receive no settlement. You will receive nothing. The world will forget your name. You are a footnote in a story that is ultimately all about me. You are the catalyst for my third act transformation into a benevolent philanthropist. For that, I suppose I should thank you." He turned away. "My security will show you out. Do not attempt to contact me or my daughter ever again. Your life as you knew it is over." Ethan was escorted from the building in a daze. He stumbled out onto the bustling New York street, a ghost invisible to the thriving city around him. He had been so comprehensively outmaneuvered, so thoroughly dismantled, that there was nothing left of him but an empty shell. He had not just been defeated. He had been erased. 3 weeks later, in a quiet, sunlit room at Mount Sinai Hospital, Amelia Hayes gave birth to a 7-pound, 2-ounce baby girl. She named her Lily Rose Hayes. Alistair was there, the ruthless corporate emperor, transformed into a doting grandfather. He held the tiny infant in his arms, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle, and looked at his daughter, her face glowing with a serene, powerful happiness he hadn't seen in years. "She's perfect, Amelia." He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She's our future." Amelia smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "She is," she agreed. Later that evening, after her father had left, Amelia stood by the vast hospital window, holding Lily close. The city glittered below a sprawling universe of light and possibility. For months, that view had been a symbol of a life that was a beautiful lie. Now it was different. It was the world she was going to help her daughter navigate. The world she was going to help change through her work at the foundation. The fire of her husband's betrayal had burned down the gilded cage she had lived in, and from the ashes she had emerged not as a victim, but as the architect of her own life. She looked down at the sleeping face of her daughter, a legacy of love, not of deceit. Her new life, a real life, was just beginning. So what do we take away from the story of Amelia Ethan and Alistair Hayes? It's a powerful, brutal reminder that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are world-shattering. Ethan Sterling's betrayal wasn't just a simple affair. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. He didn't just cheat on his wife. He tried to leverage a titan's most precious asset, his daughter. He learned the hard way that when you play with fire, you will get burned. But when you betray a king, he will salt the earth so nothing can ever grow again. This story is about the ferocious power of a father's love, the resilience of a woman betrayed, and the cold, hard reality that in the world of legacy and power, loyalty is everything. What do you think, was Alistair's revenge justified, or did he go too far? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories of epic drama and sweet revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales. A storm raged outside the grand iron gates of the Blackwood Manor. But it was nothing compared to the tempest brewing inside. Lena, 7 months pregnant and trembling, clutched a single, hastily packed bag. The man she loved, her husband, Sebastian, stood before her, his face a mask of cold fury. "Get her out!" he hissed, his voice echoing in the marble foyer that had been her home. "I never want to see you or that thing you're carrying again." He cast her out into the unforgiving night, penniless and abandoned. But what Sebastian Montgomery didn't know was that betrayal works in mysterious ways, and the person he trusted most in the world was about to orchestrate the ultimate reversal of fortune. The Montgomery fortune was old, the kind of wealth that whispered through the halls of Ivy League universities and echoed in the boardrooms of Wall Street. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was foundational, woven into the very fabric of New York's high society. Blackwood Manor, a sprawling stone estate overlooking the Hudson River, was its crown jewel. For the past 2 years, it had been Lena Petrov's home. For the past 6 hours, it had been her prison. She met Sebastian Montgomery during a charity gala she was helping to cater. He was the golden heir, impossibly handsome, with a smile that could disarm world leaders. She was a culinary student with aspirations and a spirit that shone brighter than the ballroom's crystal chandeliers. He was charmed by her lack of pretense. She was swept away by a fairy tale she never thought she'd star in. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a wedding that was the talk of the season. Lena, initially intimidated by the sheer scale of his world, found her footing with a quiet grace that surprised many, including Sebastian's formidable mother, Catherine Montgomery. Catherine, the matriarch who held the family's legacy with a velvet-gloved but iron fist, saw in Lena a strength and integrity she feared her own son lacked. But fairy tales have a way of souring. As Sebastian's 30s approached, the pressure to helm Montgomery Industries mounted. His father, the late Robert Montgomery, had been a titan of industry, a brilliant and decisive man. Sebastian, for all his charm, struggled to fill those enormous shoes. A recent high-stakes merger with a German tech firm, a deal he had personally championed, was teetering on the brink of collapse. The stress gnawed at him, twisting his charm into impatience and his confidence into paranoia. The cracks in their marriage began as hairline fractures, a snapped retort over dinner, a cancelled date night for yet another urgent meeting. He started spending more time with his sister Beatrice, a woman who wore the Montgomery name like armor, and viewed Lena as a temporary, pretty distraction. Beatrice had never approved of the marriage, often making thinly veiled comments about Lena's humble origins. The catalyst for the final shattering blow came in the form of an anonymous email. It arrived in Sebastian's inbox on a Tuesday afternoon, a day when everything else was already going wrong. The German deal had hit a major snag. A single grainy photo was attached. It showed Lena months ago having lunch on a park bench with a male friend from her culinary school days. They were laughing heads close together. The accompanying text was poison expertly crafted to exploit his deepest insecurities. Does the heir to the Montgomery fortune know who his wife really entertains? Be careful, the legacy you think you're building isn't someone else's. Under normal circumstances, Sebastian might have laughed it off. But he wasn't normal. He was a man drowning in professional failure, desperate for a target to blame. The paranoia that had been simmering within him boiled over. He didn't see an innocent lunch. He saw betrayal. He didn't see his pregnant wife. He saw a schemer who had trapped him. He waited until dinner. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke rain lashing against the panoramic windows of the dining room. Lena had prepared his favorite meal, coq au vin, a peace offering for the distance that had grown between them. He didn't touch it. He just stared at her, his eyes cold and distant. "Is everything all right, Seb?" she asked, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. The baby was kicking a gentle rhythmic tap against her palm. "I know, Lena," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Know what?" she asked, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. He slid his phone across the polished mahogany table. The screen glowed with the damning photo and text. Lena's breath hitched. "Seb, that's David. From school. This was months ago. We were just catching up." "Were you catching up when you got pregnant too?" The question was a physical blow. The air left Lena's lungs. "What?" she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "How can you even ask that? It all makes sense now." He continued, standing up and beginning to pace his movements, agitated feral. "The timing of it all. You secure the Montgomery name, then you secure your future with a child that probably isn't even mine." Tears streamed down Lena's face, hot and furious. "You know that's not true. This is our baby, Sebastian. Ours. I have never, ever been unfaithful to you." "Lies!" he roared, slamming his hand on the table. The crystal glasses jumped, and a water goblet tipped over its contents, spreading like a dark stain on the white linen. "My sister was right about you all along. You're a leech, a gold digger, who saw an easy mark." Every word was a shard of glass tearing her apart. This wasn't the man she loved. This was a monster wearing his face. "This is insane," she sobbed. "This is about the merger, isn't it? You're failing, so you're lashing out at me." His face went pale with rage. He had hit a nerve. "The merger has nothing to do with your infidelity." He pointed a trembling finger towards the door. "I want you out of my house, now." "Your house?" Lena choked out a laugh that was more of a sob. "This is my home, Sebastian. I'm your wife. I am carrying your child. You are carrying a burden I no longer want," he said, the cruelty in his voice absolute. "Beatrice is on her way over. She'll watch you pack a bag. The rest of your things will be sent to wherever it is people like you go." "Sebastian, please," she begged, rising from her chair and approaching him. "Don't do this. Don't let them poison you against us. Think about our baby." He flinched away from her touch as if she were diseased. "Don't you dare use that thing to manipulate me. Pack your bag. I'll call security to escort you out." He turned and strode out of the room, leaving Lena standing amidst the ruins of their dinner, the ruins of their life. Beatrice arrived 20 minutes later, her expression a mixture of triumph and disdain. She stood arms crossed in the doorway of their master suite as Lena, numb with shock and grief, threw a few essential items into a duffel bag. She took her wallet, her phone, the small ultrasound photo she kept on her nightstand, and the antique silver locket her own mother had given her. "Try not to take any of the family heirlooms on your way out," Beatrice sneered. Lena didn't grace her with a response. With as much dignity as she could muster, she walked down the grand, curving staircase, past the ancestral portraits, whose eyes seemed to follow her with silent judgment. Sebastian was waiting by the main door. His arms crossed his face, unreadable. 2 uniformed security guards stood impassively behind him. The rain was a torrential downpour now. As the heavy oak door swung open, a blast of wind and water hit her. "Get out!" Sebastian repeated, his voice devoid of all emotion. Lena looked at him one last time, her eyes pleading for a flicker of the man she married. She found none. With a broken heart, she stepped out of the warmth and light of Blackwood Manor and into the cold, raging storm of the night. The massive door clicked shut behind her, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, sealing her fate. The cold rain soaked through Lena's thin cardigan in seconds, plastering her hair to her face and sending a deep, penetrating chill into her bones. She stood on the bluestone steps of the manor, the place where she had posed for wedding photos just 2 years ago, now a symbol of her exile. The perfectly manicured lawns, the ancient oak trees, the distant glimmer of the Hudson River. It all felt like a scene from someone else's life. Her first instinct was a wave of pure, paralyzing panic. She was 7 months pregnant with no car, no cash beyond the $200 in her wallet, and nowhere to go. Her phone was in her bag. But who could she call? Her parents were retired and living in a small condo in Florida, in no position to help. Her mind raced, sorting through a mental Rolodex of friends, most of whom were now their friends, intertwined with Sebastian's world. Contacting them would be a betrayal in his eyes, not that it mattered anymore. Then she remembered Chloe. Chloe Davis was her rock. They had met in the trenches of culinary school, bonding over third-degree burns and the stress of a perfect soufflé. Chloe was a freelance photographer now, scrappy, independent, and fiercely loyal. She lived in a tiny but vibrant apartment in Brooklyn, a world away from the sterile opulence of Blackwood Manor. Shivering Lena fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb and clumsy. She shielded the screen from the rain and found Chloe's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Lena's hope began to falter. It was past 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lena, is that you? It sounds like you're in a hurricane. Relief washed over Lena so intensely her knees felt weak. Chloe, she sobbed the single word carrying all her pain and fear. Can you come get it? Get me? Get you from where? What's wrong? Are you okay? Is the baby okay? The questions tumbled out, laced with immediate concern. I'm at the manor. Sebastian, he kicked me out. The words sounded absurd even to her own ears. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Chloe's voice returned, sharp and clear. That son of a bitch. Don't move. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 45 minutes, maybe an hour with this weather. Can you get somewhere dry? Is there a gatehouse or something? I'm on the front steps, Lena said, her voice trembling. I don't think I'm allowed anywhere else. Okay, honey, just stay strong for me. I'm coming. The line went dead. 45 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. Lena huddled under the small portico, trying to shield her belly from the wind. Each gust felt like a personal attack. The baby, sensing her distress, was still and quiet, a fact that sent a fresh wave of fear through her. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, whispering soft reassurances, not just for the child, but for herself. She thought back over the evening, replaying the argument in a torturous loop. The coldness in Sebastian's eyes, the triumphant smirk on Beatrice's face. The accusation was so vile, so baseless, it defied logic. How could he believe it? How could the man who had vowed to love and protect her turn on her so viciously? She realized with a sickening certainty that it was never about the photo. The photo was just an excuse. He was looking for a scapegoat for his own failures, and she, the outsider, was the easiest target. The minutes crawled by. Headlights occasionally swept across the long, winding driveway. but they were all residents of the exclusive enclave, passing by without a second glance at the lone, drenched figure on the Montgomerys' doorstep. Lena felt invisible, erased. Finally, the familiar headlights of Chloe's beat-up Subaru hatchback appeared at the far end of the drive. The car chugged its way up the incline, looking comically out of place in front of the grand mansion. The moment Chloe pulled up, the passenger door flew open. "Get in! Get in!" Chloe yelled over the storm. Lena scrambled into the car, dragging her wet bag with her. She collapsed into the seat, shaking uncontrollably from cold and shock. Chloe immediately cranked up the heat and wrapped a thick, dry blanket she'd brought from the back seat around Lena's shoulders. "Oh, Lena," Chloe said, her voice soft with pity as she took in her friend's tear-streaked face and drenched clothes. "What did he do?" "The dam broke." Lena told her everything, the words tumbling out between ragged sobs. The stress of the merger, Beatrice's constant undermining the anonymous email, the cruel accusation, the final brutal command to get out. Chloe listened, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Her expression hardened from concern to pure, unadulterated rage. "He accused you of cheating. While you're carrying his child, I'm going to kill him. I'm not kidding. I will commit actual premeditated murder." "It's not worth it," Lena whispered, though the ferocity of Chloe's loyalty was a small, warm spark in the vast coldness of her heart. "What are you going to do?" Chloe asked, her voice softening again as she navigated the slick roads away from the opulent prison Lena had called home. "I don't know," Lena admitted. "I have nothing, Chloe. My bank account is a joint one with him. He'll freeze it. My name isn't on the deed to the house or on any of the cars. I have a degree, but I haven't worked in 2 years. I'm 7 months pregnant. Who's going to hire me? You'll stay with me." Chloe said the statement, leaving no room for argument. "My place is a shoebox, but the couch is surprisingly comfortable, and the baby won't care about square footage as long as its mom is safe. We'll figure it out. Together." Tears filled Lena's eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. They drove in silence for a while, the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers, a hypnotic comfort. As they crossed the bridge into the vibrant, chaotic world of Brooklyn, the glittering skyline of Manhattan shone behind them. Lena looked back at it, at the distant, unseen point where Blackwood Manor stood. It looked like a different planet. She had been so enamored with that world, so desperate to fit in, that she hadn't realized the gilded cage was closing around her until it was too late. Chloe's apartment was exactly as she remembered, small, cluttered with photography equipment and books, but warm and alive. A half-finished puzzle was on the coffee table, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon. It felt more like home than the mansion ever had. Chloe helped her out of her wet clothes, gave her a set of dry, oversized pajamas, and made her a cup of chamomile tea. As Lena sat on the couch, wrapped in another blanket, the baby finally gave a reassuring kick. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "One more person to call," Lena said, her voice still hoarse. "Who?" "Catherine," Lena said. "Sebastian's mother. She was always kind to me. I need to tell her. I don't want her to hear his twisted version of the story first." Chloe nodded. "Good idea. But get some sleep first. You've been through hell. Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll face it with a clear head." Lena agreed, though she knew sleep would be a long time coming. Curled on Chloe's couch, with the sounds of the city and the storm outside, she felt the full weight of her situation crash down on her. She had lost her husband, her home, her security. All she had left was a small bag of belongings, a fiercely loyal friend, and the unborn child, who was both the source of her current crisis and her only reason to fight for a future. Catherine Montgomery was a creature of habit. Every morning she rose at precisely 6:00 a.m., read the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal cover to cover, and then took a call from the family's chief financial advisor. She managed the vast Montgomery fortune, not with the swashbuckling bravado of her late husband Robert, or the entitled recklessness of her son Sebastian, but with a quiet, surgical precision. She saw the world as a complex chessboard, and she was always 10 moves ahead. When her private line rang at 7:30 a.m., she was already in her home office, a magnificent book-lined room in her Upper East Side penthouse. She glanced at the caller ID Beatrice. Catherine felt a familiar flicker of weariness. A call from her daughter this early rarely meant good news. "Mother." Beatrice began, her voice brimming with a poorly concealed glee that immediately set Catherine on edge. "I have some rather significant family news." "Do you, dear?" Catherine replied, her tone cool and even. She took a sip of her tea. "It's about Sebastian and Lena. They had a terrible fight last night. It turns out Lena has been unfaithful. Sebastian discovered the truth and, well, he did what had to be done. He threw her out." Catherine placed her teacup down so gently it didn't make a sound. Her mind, however, was racing. Unfaithful Lena. It was the most preposterous thing she had ever heard. Lena was many things. Kind, resilient, perhaps a bit naive, but she was not deceitful. Catherine knew character when she saw it. It was the bedrock of her entire life's philosophy. "He threw her out," Catherine repeated, her voice betraying nothing. "His pregnant wife, out of the house, in the middle of that storm. He had no choice," Beatrice insisted. "The betrayal was immense. He was heartbroken. He found evidence. She was cheating on him, and there's no telling who the baby's father really is." Catherine's eyes narrowed. Evidence. She knew her son. Sebastian was impulsive and proud, a dangerous combination. When cornered, especially professionally, he would thrash about seeking to place blame anywhere but on himself. The German merger was a disaster of his own, making a fact she was well aware of. This reeked of misdirection. "And where is Lena now?" Catherine asked calmly. "I have no idea. He just told her to leave. It's for the best, Mother. She was never one of us. Now Sebastian can finally get his head straight and focus on what's important." What's important? To Beatrice, that meant money, status, and bloodlines. To Catherine, it meant legacy, honor, and the future of the family, a future currently growing inside the very woman her son had just exiled. "Thank you for informing me, Beatrice," Catherine said, the chill in her voice now unmistakable. "I will handle this." She hung up before Beatrice could reply. For a long moment she sat in perfect stillness, her manicured fingers steepled before her. She thought of her late husband, Robert. He had adored Sebastian, but he had never been blind to his son's flaws. Robert had been the architect of their empire, a man who valued loyalty and integrity above all else. He had seen the potential for recklessness in Sebastian, the same entitled arrogance that had been the downfall of so many other great families. It was why he had structured his will the way he had. Catherine picked up the phone again and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Alistair Finch, please." "It's Catherine Montgomery calling." Alistair Finch had been the Montgomery family's legal counsel for 40 years. He was discreet, brilliant, and utterly devoted to the vision Robert Montgomery had laid out. "Catherine," Alistair's voice came on the line, warm and professional. To what do I owe the pleasure this early? Alistair, I need you to pull the file on Blackwood Manor. Specifically, the codicil Robert added to the trust 8 years ago. The family preservation clause. There was a brief pause. Of course, Catherine. Is there a problem? My son has just thrown his pregnant wife out of the house based on an unsubstantiated claim of infidelity, Catherine stated flatly. He has endangered the life of my grandchild and sullied the family's honor with his tantrum. Robert foresaw this kind of behavior. It's time to enact the contingency he put in place. Alistair let out a low whistle. It is an aggressive contingency, Catherine. Are you certain? Robert was not an aggressive man, Alistair. He was a strategic one. He believed the home should be a sanctuary for the family, especially for the mother of the next generation. He put that clause in place to protect the lineage from the very immaturity and foolish pride Sebastian is displaying. My son has mistaken stewardship for ownership. It's time for a correction. I'll draw up the paperwork immediately, Alistair said. The transfer of deed is straightforward. The trust is explicit. In the event the primary resident, Sebastian Montgomery, acts in a manner that destabilizes the family unit or endangers his legal heir full and immediate ownership of the Blackwood Manor property, reverts to the trust to be administered at your discretion. You have the full authority to transfer ownership to his legal spouse, Lena Montgomery, for the security of her and the child. Excellent, Catherine said. Have a courier bring the documents to my penthouse for my signature. Then have them delivered to Lena. I need to find out where she is. Just as she hung up her personal cell phone, the one she gave to only a select few buzzed. It was an unknown number. She answered with caution. Hello. Catherine. It's Lena. The voice was weak, strained, but unmistakable. Catherine's severe expression softened instantly. Lena, my dear, are you all right? Where are you? I'm okay. I'm with my friend Chloe in Brooklyn. Lena said, her voice cracking. I wanted you to know. What Sebastian said. It isn't true. I know it isn't, my dear. Catherine said, her voice firm and reassuring. I never believed it for a second. You are a woman of sterling character. My son, on the other hand, is a fool, and he is about to learn a very hard lesson about the consequences of his actions. Lena was taken aback by the force of Catherine's conviction. What do you mean? You just stay put and rest. You and the baby are my only priority right now. Someone will be arriving later today with some documents for you. Do not go back to the manor. Do not contact Sebastian. Just trust me. Can you do that? Lena, who had expected a lecture, or at best a sympathetic but distant platitude, was overwhelmed. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I can trust you. Good, Catherine said. Now tell me, what is this friend's address? After getting the details, Catherine hung up and took a deep breath. The pieces were in motion. This wasn't about punishment, not entirely. It was about restoration. It was about honoring her husband's wishes. It was about protecting the future. Sebastian had treated his wife and unborn child as disposable. Catherine was about to show him and the world that they were in fact the most valuable assets the Montgomery family had. She walked over to the window, looking out over the city. A plan was forming not just for the house, but for everything. This was no longer just Sebastian's mess to fix. It was a crisis that required the steady hand of the true head of the family. Sebastian woke up with a pounding headache and a sour taste in his mouth. The adrenaline of the previous night's confrontation had worn off, leaving behind a hollow, unsettling quiet in the cavernous manor. He had expected to feel a sense of relief, of righteous victory. Instead, he just felt empty. He wandered downstairs. The remnants of last night's dinner had been cleared away, but the ghost of the argument lingered in the air. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his movements sluggish. Beatrice was already in the breakfast nook, scrolling through her phone with a smug look on her face. "Good morning," she said brightly. "The house already feels lighter, doesn't it? No more charity case walking the halls." Sebastian didn't answer. He stared out the window at the rain-washed grounds. He kept seeing Lena's face, the utter shock and hurt in her eyes. A sliver of doubt, small but sharp, pierced through his anger. Had he been too rash? The anonymous email. It was so convenient, so perfectly timed with his professional anxieties. "Mother called," Beatrice said, interrupting his thoughts. "She knows. I told her you finally did the right thing." "What did she say?" Sebastian asked, a knot of unease forming in his stomach. His mother's approval was something he still craved, a holdover from a childhood spent in his father's long shadow. She was quiet. You know how she is. Said she'd handle it. Beatrice shrugged. Probably just needs to get the lawyers to formally cut Lena off from the family accounts. Good riddance. Just then the doorbell chimed. A moment later the butler, a man who had served the family for 30 years, appeared in the doorway looking flustered. "Mrs. Montgomery is here, sir," he announced. Sebastian and Beatrice exchanged a look. Their mother rarely visited the manor unannounced. Catherine swept into the room, her presence immediately commanding all the air. She was dressed impeccably, in a charcoal grey suit, her silver hair styled perfectly. She was not alone. Behind her was Alistair Finch, the family lawyer, holding a leather briefcase. "Mother," Sebastian said, standing up. "What is this?" Catherine didn't look at him. Her gaze swept the room, cold and appraising. "Beatrice, what are you doing here? This is not your home." Beatrice scoffed. "I was just supporting my brother through a difficult time." "You were fanning the flames of his worst instincts, as you always do," Catherine replied icily. "Your presence here is no longer required. Leave." The command was so absolute that Beatrice for once was speechless. She looked to Sebastian for support, but he was staring at his mother, dumbfounded. With a huff, Beatrice grabbed her purse and stormed out, shooting a venomous glare at Alistair Finch as she passed. Catherine finally turned her steely gaze to her son. "Sebastian, you have committed a grievous error. You have behaved not like a Montgomery, but like a common brute. You have dishonored your wife, endangered your heir, and brought shame upon this family's name." "Mother, you don't understand," Sebastian stammered. "She betrayed me. I have proof." "You have an anonymous email, a tool for cowards and manipulators," Catherine countered, her voice sharp as a razor. "You didn't seek the truth. You sought a scapegoat for your own professional inadequacies. Your father would be ashamed." The mention of his father struck Sebastian like a physical blow. He staggered back a step. "That's not fair." "What is not fair," Catherine said, stepping closer, "is casting your pregnant wife out into a storm because your ego is bruised. Blackwood Manor has been the heart of this family for generations. It is a place of sanctuary, of legacy. Your father understood that, and he understood you." Alistair Finch stepped forward and opened his briefcase, retrieving a thick document bound in a blue cover. He placed it on the breakfast table. "What is that?" Sebastian asked, his voice barely a whisper. "This," Alistair said, "is a legal transfer of deed. As per the Family Preservation Clause of the Robert Montgomery Trust, your actions last night constituted a fundamental breach of your duties as steward of this property. Your mother, as the executor of the trust, has enacted the contingency." Sebastian stared at him blankly, the legal jargon failing to compute. "What are you talking about?" Catherine's voice was devoid of all emotion. "I am talking about the fact that you no longer own this house, Sebastian. As of 10 o'clock this morning, you are no longer the master of Blackwood Manor. You are a guest." Sebastian's world tilted on its axis. He laughed a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible. This house is mine." "It was never truly yours to begin with," Catherine said. "It was entrusted to you, a trust which you have now broken. Alistair, if you would." Alistair cleared his throat. "The clause is quite clear. In the event of your acting in a manner detrimental to the well-being of your legal spouse and heir ownership reverts to the trust to be reassigned to ensure their security. As such, Catherine has instructed me to execute the transfer. The new sole owner of Blackwood Manor is Lena Montgomery." Silence. The only sound was the frantic pounding of blood in Sebastian's ears. He looked from his mother's implacable face to the legal document on the table and back again. It was a joke. It had to be a joke. You gave my house to her." He choked out the words laced with disbelief and fury. "To the woman who cheated on me. I gave the family home to the mother of my grandchild," Catherine corrected him, "to ensure she and the baby have the safety and stability that you so recklessly stripped from them. You have 24 hours to pack a bag and vacate the premises. You may take your personal clothing, your car, and the contents of your private bank account. Everything else stays. It belongs to Lena now." As if on cue, a car crunched on the gravel driveway outside. Not a sleek town car, but a battered Subaru. A few moments later, the front door opened. Lena walked in, flanked by a nervous-looking Chloe. She stopped dead in the entryway, her eyes wide as she took in the scene, Sebastian, pale and shaking, Catherine standing like a statue of judgment, and Alistair Finch holding the papers that represented an impossible shift in power. "Lena, my dear," Catherine said, her voice softening completely as she turned to her daughter-in-law. "Welcome home." Lena looked at Sebastian, whose face was a storm of rage, humiliation, and confusion. Then she looked at the document on the table. She looked at Catherine, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. The world that had been violently ripped from under her feet less than 24 hours ago had just been handed back to her gift-wrapped and tied with the bow of absolute authority. What is happening?" Lena whispered, her hand going to her belly. "A correction," Catherine said simply. "This is your house now, Lena. You are safe here." Sebastian finally found his voice, a raw, wounded roar. "You can't do this. This is my life. My legacy." "Your legacy is in that woman's belly," Catherine shot back, pointing at Lena, "and you threw it out in the rain. Now you will learn what it feels like to be on the outside looking in. Pack your bags, Sebastian. The clock is ticking." The 24 hours that followed were the most surreal of Lena's life. Sebastian, utterly defeated and humiliated, moved through the house like a ghost. He refused to look at Lena, his face a thunderous mask of fury. He packed 2 suitcases in silence, watched over by the same impassive security guards he had used to eject his wife. The transfer of power was absolute and brutally swift. When he finally walked out the front door and got into his Aston Martin, he didn't look back. The roar of the engine faded down the long driveway, leaving behind a profound and unsettling silence. Lena stood in the center of the grand foyer, her hand resting on the smooth, cool marble of a pedestal that had always seemed to belong to another world. Now, it was her pedestal in her house. Chloe stood beside her, looking around with wide, disbelieving eyes. I don't even know what to say, Chloe breathed. Your mother-in-law is not a woman. She's a force of nature. Catherine, who had overseen the entire transition with quiet authority, turned to Lena. The house is yours, Lena. The staff now reports to you. The household accounts have been transferred to a new account in your name only. You are in control. But why? Lena asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why would you do this for me, against your own son? Because you are the future of this family, and he has proven himself a poor custodian of that future, Catherine said simply. My husband did not build an empire so his son could tear it down in a fit of pique, but this is only the first step. Now we find the truth. Catherine was not a woman to make idle statements. The next day she hired a team of private investigators, not brutish thugs, but discreet forensic accountants and cybersecurity experts from a top-tier corporate intelligence firm. Their target was not Lena, but the source of the poison, the anonymous email. An attack like this is rarely random, Catherine explained to Lena over tea in the sunroom, a room Lena had always loved. Sebastian was vulnerable because of the failing German deal. Someone exploited that. We need to find out who and why. While the investigators worked their magic, Lena tried to adjust to her new reality. The staff, initially wary, soon responded to her innate kindness, a stark contrast to Sebastian's often impatient commands. She insisted they call her Lena, not Mrs. Montgomery, and took the time to learn all their names. The vast, intimidating manor began to feel less like a museum and more like a potential home. Chloe stayed with her for the first few days, a comforting, grounding presence in the whirlwind. Beatrice tried to call, once her voice shrill with indignation. Lena, on Catherine's advice, didn't answer. Her number was changed the next day. She needed peace, not poison. The most difficult part was the emotional fallout. She was the mistress of a grand estate, financially secure, beyond her wildest dreams. But her heart was broken. At night, in the enormous bed she had once shared with Sebastian, she felt a profound loneliness. She mourned the man she had loved, the man she now believed might never have truly existed. She clutched the ultrasound photo and whispered to her baby, promising him or her a life of love and stability no matter what. 2 weeks later, the investigators delivered their report to Catherine, who reviewed it with Lena in the manor's library. The findings were explosive. The email had been sent from a disposable encrypted account, but the experts had traced its digital ghost. It had been created on a public Wi-Fi network at a coffee shop in downtown Manhattan. By cross-referencing security footage from the cafe with visitor logs from Sebastian's office building, they found a match. The person who sent the email was Sienna Croft. The name meant nothing to Lena, but Catherine's eyes hardened. Sienna Croft, Catherine said, her voice dripping with contempt. She is a junior vice president at Sterling Nash, our biggest competitor. They were the rival bidders for the German tech firm. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The investigators had dug deeper. Sienna Croft had been seen meeting with a disgruntled junior executive from Montgomery Industries who had been working on the German deal. He had been feeding her inside information, helping her company sabotage the merger from within. The email to Sebastian wasn't personal. It was corporate espionage of the most vicious kind. Sienna had identified Sebastian's psychological weak points, his insecurity and pride, and launched a precision strike. By destabilizing his personal life, she ensured he would be too distracted and emotionally compromised to salvage the deal. It had worked perfectly. Sterling Nash had successfully reopened talks with the Germans just last week. But there was more. The investigators had also, at Catherine's insistence, discreetly obtained DNA samples from Sebastian, from a coffee cup he'd left at his new, much smaller apartment, and from Lena from a water glass. They had run a prenatal paternity test. The report was unequivocal. Probability of paternity 99.999%. Lena stared at the words, tears blurring her vision. It was a vindication she knew in her soul to be true, but seeing it in black and white was a release. She was not a liar. She was not a cheat. She was the victim of a cruel and calculated corporate ploy, and her husband had been its willing pawn. Catherine placed a hand over hers. Now we have the truth. All of it. That evening, Catherine arranged for 2 more visitors. The first was Beatrice. Shown the evidence of the corporate plot, Beatrice's smug certainty crumbled. The idea that someone had played her brother, and by extension the entire Montgomery family for fools, was a deep insult to her pride. Sienna Croft, she did all this? Beatrice asked aghast. She did, Catherine confirmed. And you and Sebastian, with your baseless accusations and snobbery, handed her the weapon. For the first time, Beatrice looked genuinely ashamed. She turned to Lena. I am sorry. She said the words clearly difficult for her. I was wrong about you. I let my prejudice blind me. I am truly sorry, Lena. It wasn't a magic wand that healed all wounds, but it was a start. The second visitor was Sebastian. He arrived looking haggard. The 2 weeks on his own, stripped of his power and privilege, had taken their toll. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary desperation. Catherine had him shown into the library, where she and Lena waited. Without a word, Catherine slid the investigator's report and the paternity test results across the polished table. Sebastian read them, his hands shaking. He sank into a chair, his face ashen. The full weight of his catastrophic misjudgment crashed down upon him. He had not been a righteous, wronged husband. He had been a fool, a puppet manipulated by a business rival into destroying his own family. He had accused the love of his life of the ultimate betrayal, while she was being victimized by his own professional enemy. He looked up, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate shame. He looked at Lena, truly looked at her for the first time in weeks, and saw not a traitor, but the woman he loved, the woman he had wounded beyond measure. Lena, he whispered, his voice cracking. Oh God, what have I done? The library at Blackwood Manor, once a symbol of imposing ancestral power, now felt like a courtroom where Sebastian's soul was on trial. He stared at the documents, at the undeniable proof of Lena's innocence and his own monumental folly. The silence was heavy, broken only by the quiet ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I believed it, he said, his voice hollow with self-loathing. I actually believed you could do that. To me. To us. He looked at Lena, his eyes pleading. I was so consumed by the merger falling apart, by the feeling that I was failing my father's memory. When that email came, it was like an answer. It was easier to believe you had betrayed me than to believe I was failing on my own. Lena listened, her expression unreadable. She felt a flicker of pity for the broken man in front of her, but it was buried under layers of deep, profound hurt. Pity couldn't erase the memory of standing in the rain, cast out and terrified. It couldn't heal the wounds his words had inflicted. You didn't just believe it, Sebastian, she said, her voice steady and clear, devoid of the hysteria he had last heard from her. It was the voice of a woman who had been through the fire and found steel on the other side. You wanted to believe it. You needed a villain, and I was the most convenient one. Catherine watched the exchange, remaining silent. This was not her battle to fight. She had leveled the playing field. Now the future of their relationship, if any, rested on them. "I know," he choked out. "Lena, I am so sorry. Sorry isn't even a word for what I feel. It's a sickness in my soul. I threw away everything that mattered for my own stupid pride." He got up from his chair and slowly, hesitantly knelt on the floor before her. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve this baby. But I am begging you, please give me a chance to earn your forgiveness. Let me come home, not as the master of the house, but as your husband, as the father of our child." Lena looked down at her kneeling husband. 2 weeks ago, she would have done anything to hear those words. Now she felt a strange sense of detachment. He was asking to come back into her home. He was asking for a place in her life. The power dynamic had been irrevocably, fundamentally altered. "Get up, Sebastian," she said softly. He obeyed, returning to his chair. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Kneeling won't fix this. Grand gestures won't fix this. Do you know what I thought about when I was sitting on my friend's couch with nothing but the clothes on my back? I realized that you didn't just throw me out of a house. You tried to take my dignity. You tried to take my child's legitimacy. You treated us like we were disposable." "I was a monster," he whispered. "Yes," she agreed, the simple affirmation more cutting than any insult. "You were, and I can't just forget that. I can't unhear the things you said." She took a deep breath. "But this baby deserves a father, and I once loved a man I thought was good and kind. I don't know if that man still exists." A flicker of hope ignited in Sebastian's eyes. "He does. I swear he does. I'll do anything, Lena. Therapy, counseling, anything. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you." Lena looked at Catherine, who gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was Lena's decision, and she would support it either way. "You can't come back to the manor," Lena said finally. The hope in Sebastian's eyes dimmed. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. This is my safe place now. This is my child's safe place." She continued, "You will find your own apartment nearby. You will go to therapy. We will go to couples counseling. You will be present for the birth of our child. You will have a chance to be a father. But earning the right to be my husband again, that is not guaranteed. You will have to build a new foundation with me, one based on actual trust and respect, not on grand romantic gestures and a shared last name. You will have to prove through your actions every single day that you are the man I thought I married." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was more than he deserved. It was a path forward, albeit a long and difficult one. "Okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Okay, Lena. Whatever you say. I'll do it." In the weeks that followed, a new fragile normal began to take shape. Sebastian moved into a modest apartment in a nearby town. He started therapy. Catherine, meanwhile, used the evidence from the investigators to launch a full-scale corporate counter-assault. She exposed Sterling Nash's corporate espionage, leading to a massive scandal, the firing of Sienna Croft, and the German firm pulling out of their deal and reopening negotiations with a humbled and newly advised Montgomery Industries. Sebastian and Lena began their counseling sessions, or painful meetings, where years of unspoken issues came to the surface. He learned to listen, truly listen. She learned to voice her own needs and fears, something she had suppressed in her desire to fit into his world. When Lena went into labor a month later, Sebastian was there. He held her hand, coached her breathing, and when their son Nicholas Robert Montgomery was born, he wept with a joy so pure and profound, it was heartbreaking. Holding his son for the first time, Sebastian looked at Lena, who was exhausted but radiant. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Yes, he is," Lena said, her eyes on their child. She knew their story was far from over. Trust once shattered, so completely, could not be glued back together overnight. But as she looked at her son, and at the humbled man who was his father, she felt not the bitterness of betrayal, but the quiet, resilient hope of a new beginning. She was no longer just Lena Petrov, the caterer who got lucky. She was Lena Montgomery, the mother of the Montgomery heir, the mistress of Blackwood Manor, and the architect of her own future, a future she would build not on a fairy tale, but on the solid foundation of strength, truth, and hard-earned forgiveness. That is the incredible story of Lena Montgomery, a woman who was cast out with nothing and reclaimed everything, not through revenge, but through quiet strength and the unshakable power of truth. Her journey shows us that true power isn't about wealth or status, but about integrity, resilience, and the courage to redefine your own life even when it's been shattered. It reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected allies can appear in our darkest moments, and that a person's true character is revealed not by what they have, but by what they do when it's all taken away. If Lena's journey from despair to empowerment moved you, please give this video a thumbs up to show your support. What did you think of Catherine's ultimate move? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story with someone who loves a powerful tale of justice and resilience, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life stories. Thanks for listening.